A garden at night, old olive trees, twisted by 1,000 years of wind. The moon is low, the air is cold for spring in Jerusalem. There is a man on his knees between two of those trees. And then he is not on his knees, he is on his face. And the sweat coming off his skins is so heavy, so red, so thick, that the dust between the stones is turning to mud. We will get to that garden. But not yet. Because before you understand what was happening in the dirt, you need to understand the 2 times he cried before. You need to understand that the shortest verse in the entire Bible, 2 words long, 11 letters, is also one of the most theologically dense lines anyone ever wrote. Jesus wept. Most people can quote it. Almost nobody knows he did it 3 times. And here is what nobody tells you. Each time, each of those 3 times, he was weeping for something different. He wept for a friend. He wept for a city. And in that garden, with his face in the mud, he wept for a world. Stay with me, because the pattern is not random. The Greek language has 3 different words for crying. And the gospel writers, who knew Greek the way a carpenter knows wood, used a different word every single time. 3 tears, 3 words, 3 expanding circles of love. From one person he knew by name, to a city of 500,000, to every human being who would ever live. This is not a story about a verse. This is not a story about a moment. This is not a story about how God feels things sometimes. This is a story about a God whose tear ducts work. A God who, when he came down here to live in a body, used that body to cry. Not just to teach, not just to heal, to cry. Here is what most people miss. We were told from childhood that God is the unmoved mover, the philosopher's God, who sits above the weather and feels nothing. And maybe somewhere in a seminary library that God exists on paper. But the God of the actual Bible, the God who walked dust roads in sandals and ate fish by lakeshores, that God cried in public, 3 times that we have on record, and probably 100 more we do not. In the next 20 minutes, we are going to walk through each one. The friend, the city, the garden. We are going to look at the exact Greek words the eyewitnesses used. We are going to look at what the Roman historian Josephus wrote about what happened to the city Jesus wept over. We are going to look at what modern medical journals say about a man sweating blood under unbearable stress. And by the end, I think you will see what I see. That the shortest verse in the Bible is also the deepest. That every tear he shed was a sermon. And that the next time you find yourself crying in a room alone, and you cannot explain to anyone why, you are doing something that he has done before you. Let's start in a small house in a town called Bethany, where a man Jesus loved by name was dying. Bethany is 2 miles east of Jerusalem. You can walk it in under an hour if you know the road. And Jesus knew the road. He had walked it many times. Because in that small village, because on a side street most pilgrims never noticed, there was a house that he had stayed in. There was a family that he had grown to love. 3 siblings lived in that house, 2 sisters and a brother. Martha, the older one, who ran the kitchen. Mary, the younger one, who once poured a jar of perfume on his feet that cost a working man a full year of wages. And Lazarus, the brother, the only man in the house, the one Jesus called his friend. The Gospel of John says it plainly. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Past tense, established affection. This was not a passing acquaintance. This was a family he returned to. The kind of house where he knew which cup was his, where the dog probably knew his footsteps, where he could sit on a low stool by the door and just be tired without anyone asking why. And one day a message arrives. Lazarus is sick. The messenger does not say his name. He says something more tender. Lord, the one you love is sick. And Jesus does nothing. He stays where he is for 2 more days. 2 days of Lazarus burning with fever. 2 days of Mary holding a cool cloth to her brother's forehead. 2 days of Martha standing at the door, shielding her eyes against the sun, watching the road for the man she was sure would come. He does not come. And by the time Jesus finally starts walking toward Bethany, his friend has been dead for 4 days. The body has been washed. The body has been wrapped. The body has been carried out of the house and laid inside a cave in the rock, and a heavy stone has been rolled across the opening. In that climate, in that heat, 4 days means decay. 4 days means the smell. The soul, the rabbis taught, hovers near the body for 3 days. By day 4, the soul is gone. By day 4, there is nothing left to do but cry. And here is where it gets stranger. When Jesus comes within sight of the village, Martha sees him first. She runs out to meet him on the road. And the very first thing she says, the thing she must have rehearsed for 2 days waiting, is not anger. It is grief shaped like a question. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Then Mary comes, the younger sister, the one who anointed his feet. And she does not say anything new. She says the exact same line. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But she does not say it standing up. She says it on the ground, at his feet, weeping. And here is the verse. Here is the moment. Here is where the Greek language matters in a way that almost nobody talks about. The Gospel of John uses a word for what Jesus does next that is found nowhere else in the entire New Testament. Not in Matthew, not in Mark, not in Luke, not in any of Paul's letters, not in Revelation. One word, one time, adakrison. It does not mean to wail. It does not mean to sob loudly. It means to shed silent tears. The kind of crying you do when you cannot make a sound, when your throat closes and your shoulders shake and the only thing moving is the water down your face. Now, look at the scene the way the people standing there saw it. A village full of mourners, professional wailers paid to make noise. Jews who came from Jerusalem to weep loudly because that is what the culture demanded. And in the middle of all that performance, all that loud, public, expected grief, there is one man, quiet, tears running down without any sound. Standing in front of a cave, the crowd notices. The text says they whisper to each other, "Behold how he loved him." Here is what most people miss. This is the only place in the Gospels where outsiders correctly identify the meaning of his tears. They do not say he is weak. They do not say he is broken. They say he loved him, past tense, established, real. And then he calls Lazarus out of the tomb. And the dead man walks out, still wrapped in linen, the face cloth bound around his head, blinking into a sun he never thought he would see again. But here is the part nobody tells you. Jesus knew he was about to raise him. He told the disciples in plain language before they ever arrived, "Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go to wake him out of sleep." He knew. He knew the ending of the story before he ever walked into Bethany. He knew the stone was coming off. He knew the breath was coming back. He knew that within the next 10 minutes, the sisters would be holding their brother again. And he still cried. Think about that. The God of the universe stood in front of a cave that he was about to open. He stood next to two women that he was about to give the best news of their entire lives. And before he did any of it, before the miracle, before the resurrection, before the joy that would echo for 2,000 years, he stopped and he looked at their faces and he cried with them. Because love that knows the ending still weeps in the middle. That is the first tear. The tear for the friend, the silent tear. The tear that taught us that even when God is 1 minute away from fixing everything, he is willing to stop and feel what we feel. And it would not be the last time. A week later, maybe 2, he would walk west across the Mount of Olives, and he would crest the hill, and the city of Jerusalem would come into view across the valley. And he would do something the disciples had never seen him do before. He would stop the whole parade, and he would cry out loud in front of everyone. But that one was different. That one was not for a friend. Before we walk up that hill with him, I need to ask you something. If this is hitting you the way it is hitting me, if you can feel the weight of a man standing in front of a cave, knowing the ending, and still choosing to cry, then hit the subscribe button before you forget, because we are only 1/3 of the way in. The second tier is the one that scared the priests so badly they started planning to kill him within the week. And the third tier, the one in that garden I have not let you forget about, is the one that should change how you pray tonight. Stay with me, because what happens on that hilltop is not what you have been told. The road from Bethany to Jerusalem climbs. You leave the little village, you walk west, you go up and over the Mount of Olives. And right at the crest of that hill, right at the moment your legs are burning from the climb, the whole city of Jerusalem comes into view across the Kidron Valley. You have to picture it the way they saw it that day. Not the city as it is now. The city as Herod the Great had finished rebuilding it. White limestone catching the afternoon sun. Gold plating across the front of the sanctuary. The walls thick enough that no army in the known world had cracked them in living memory. A city at the height of its beauty. A city at the height of its arrogance. And on this particular afternoon, the road into that city is jammed. It is the week of Passover. 2.5 million pilgrims have crowded into a city built for a fraction of that. And in the middle of all that pressing, sweating, shouting crowd, a man is coming down the road on a donkey. The people in front of him are throwing palm branches under the animal's feet. The people behind him are shouting one word over and over, "Hosanna, Hosanna, save us now." He is being treated like a king. For one afternoon, the people of Jerusalem are willing to crown him in the street, and then he crests the Mount of Olives, and he sees the city, and he stops. Now here is what Luke records, and you have to slow down to feel it. The Greek word Luke uses for what Jesus does next is not the silent word from the tomb in Bethany. This is a different word, eklausin. It means loud lamentation, wailing. The kind of crying that comes out of the chest, not the eyes. The same word the Greeks use for mourning the dead. In other words, Jesus looked at that beautiful living city, the white walls, the gold temple, the millions of people inside it, and he mourned it as if it were already a corpse. The parade stopped. The hosannas trailed off. The disciples must have stood there confused because nothing in the moment called for tears. The crowd loved him. The festival was happening. The sun was warm. This was supposed to be the triumph. And he is sobbing. Here is what he said. And the words are recorded in the Gospel of Luke, and you can read them tonight if you want. If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. And then he gave a prophecy that the disciples could not have understood in the moment. He said that within one generation, the city would be surrounded by armies. The walls would be torn down. Not one stone would be left upon another. The temple they were walking toward, the same gold-plated temple, the pride of every Jew in the empire, would be flat ground. Now hold that thought, because it actually happened. 40 years after that afternoon on the Mount of Olives, the Roman general Titus marched into Judea with 60,000 soldiers. The Jewish historian Josephus, who watched it happen from the Roman side, wrote one of the most detailed and horrifying accounts of a siege in the ancient world. The siege lasted 4 months. The people inside Jerusalem ran out of food. Mothers killed their own children. The Romans built a wall around the city so that no one could escape. And on the 9th of the month of Av, by the Jewish calendar, the same date the first temple had fallen 600 years earlier, the second temple burned. Over 1 million dead inside the city. The walls torn down, the temple platform leveled. Within one generation, exactly as Jesus had said, not one stone was left upon another. Here is the part nobody tells you. The Christians who were inside Jerusalem at the time the siege began did not stay. The 4th century historian Eusebius, who had access to records we no longer have, wrote that the Christian community in Jerusalem received a warning. They remembered the words of Jesus on the Mount of Olives. They remembered the tears. And they packed up and they crossed the Jordan River, and they settled in a city called Pella in the hills to the east. They survived, all of them, because they took the weeping seriously. Now think about what that means. The tears on that hilltop were not just emotion. They were warning. They were prophecy. They were a man weeping over a place he still had time to save, knowing that most of it would not listen, but knowing also that some would. Some would remember his face on that hill. Some would pack their bags. Some would live because he had cried. This was the second tear, the tear for the city, the loud tear, the public tear. The tear that landed on stones the Romans would later tear apart. And there is one more, the one in the garden, the one I told you we would get to. But to understand the third tear, to understand why a man would sweat blood under olive trees at night, you have to understand that the first 2 tears were a buildup, friend, city, each one bigger than the last, each one a wider circle of love. Now watch what happens next. Because the third circle does not stop at a city. The third circle does not stop at a nation. The third circle goes all the way around the world, and it costs him everything. So now we come to the garden. It is the night of Passover. The supper is over. The bread has been broken. The cup has been passed. 11 men are walking with him east, out of the city, back across the Kidron Valley, up the same Mount of Olives he had on a few days before. They cross over the top. They come down the other side, and they enter a small grove of olive trees on the western slope. The grove has a name. In Aramaic, it is called Gat Shmanim, the place of the oil press, Gethsemane. There is a press in that grove, a stone wheel that crushed olives into oil for the temple. And there is something almost too perfect about the name of the place where Jesus would be crushed that night. The stones of the press knew what was coming before his friends did. He takes 8 of the disciples and tells them to wait near the entrance. And then he takes 3 with him deeper into the grove. Peter, James, John. The same 3 he had taken up the mountain when his face shone like the sun. The same 3 he had taken into the room when he raised a little girl from the dead. The 3 closest. The 3 who had seen the most. The 3 you would want with you on the worst night of your life. He tells them to stay awake. He tells them to pray. And then he walks a stone's throw farther into the dark. Alone, and he falls, not slowly, not in stages. The text says he fell on his face, forehead in the dirt, the man who had walked on water, the man who had calmed the storm, the man who had stood in front of a tomb and called a corpse out by name. That man is in the dirt. And he prays the prayer that I think is the most honest prayer in the entire Bible. Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. 3 times he prays it, each time more desperate. Each time the answer is silence. Here is the part of the story you have probably never had explained to you. The Gospel of Luke records something the other writers do not. Luke was a physician. He paid attention to bodies. And Luke writes that the sweat coming off of Jesus' skin was as great drops of blood falling down to the ground. For centuries, people read that line and thought it was poetry, a figure of speech. They thought Luke was just saying his sweat was heavy, like blood. But Luke was not writing poetry. Luke was writing medicine. There is a real documented medical condition called hematidrosis. The Indian Journal of Dermatology published a paper on it. It happens when a human being is under such extreme psychological stress that the capillaries, the tiny blood vessels around the sweat glands, actually rupture, and the blood mixes with the sweat, and it comes out through the skin. It is extraordinarily rare. It has been documented in soldiers before battle, in prisoners before execution. And it was happening to a 33-year-old man on the ground in a garden at night. Now here is the Greek word the writer of Hebrews uses for what was going on in that garden. Dakrion, tears, plural, sustained. Strong crying and tears, the letter to the Hebrews says. This was not a single moment of weeping like Bethany. This was not a public lament like Jerusalem. This was hours of it. This was the longest weeping of his entire recorded life. And while he was weeping, his 3 closest friends were asleep. He gets up, he walks back over, he looks at them. And he says one of the most heartbreaking sentences in the Gospels. Could you not watch with me 1 hour? He goes back to pray. He comes back. They are asleep again. He goes back. He comes back. They are asleep again. And in that moment, alone in the dark, with the people he loved most curled up against the cold ground, unable to keep their eyes open, he carried something that no human being has ever carried. He did not weep because he was weak. He did not weep because he did not know what came next. He did not weep because the situation surprised him. He wept because he loved you. And love that does not weep is not love. That is the part that bridges across 2,000 years and lands in your living room. You have stood in a hospital corridor. You have read a text message and felt the floor tilt. You have answered a phone call at 3 in the morning and known, from the tone of the first word, that everything just changed. You know exactly what that face in the garden looked like. Because every human being who has ever loved another human being has carried some version of that weight. The difference is what he was carrying in that grove was not one grief. It was every grief, yours included, mine included. Every cancer diagnosis, every divorce paper, every funeral, every child who never came home, every broken thing in every human heart from the first day until the last, all of it, at once, on a 33-year-old carpenter's shoulders, in a garden, at night. That is the third tier. And now you can see the pattern complete. The Greek language gave us 3 different words for crying, and the gospel writers used all 3. Silent tears for one friend in Bethany, loud wailing for one city on a hilltop, strong crying and tears, sustained for hours, sweat turning to blood in a garden for the entire world. Friend, city, world, each circle wider than the last, each tear heavier than the last. The same God in all 3, and this is what most people miss. The same God who cried in front of a cave for a man he was about to raise, who cried on a hilltop for a city he was about to warn, is the same God who, on the worst night of his life, was crying for you by name. Long before you were born, he already knew. So before we close, I want to leave you with 3 things. The first one is this. The God of the Bible is not a stoic philosopher's God. He is not the unmoved mover sitting somewhere above the weather. He has tear ducts. He has used them. 3 times that Scripture records it, and almost certainly 100 more times that nobody wrote down. The next time someone tells you that God is distant or cold or somewhere far away, you can tell them, with the Bible open, that the God of the actual text cries in public. The second one is for you personally. Your tears are not weakness in His sight. Your tears are family resemblance. When you weep over what He weeps over, when something breaks in your chest because of injustice or grief or the suffering of someone you love, you are most like Him then, not when you are strong, not when you have it together, when you cannot stop crying and you do not know why. That is when the family resemblance is clearest. The third one is the one I want you to take to bed with you tonight. The next time you find yourself crying in a room alone and you cannot stop and you cannot even fully explain why, remember this. Somewhere in history, in a small grove of olive trees on a cold spring night, there was a man on his face in the dirt. And his tears hit the ground before yours ever did. The garden has already been visited. The weeping has already been done. The same God who wept silently for one friend, who wailed audibly for one city, who sweated blood for one world, has wept for you specifically. by name, before you were born. You are not alone in that room. You never were. Which of these three tears hit you the hardest? The friend in Bethany, the city on the hilltop, or the garden at night? Tell me below. I read every comment, and I want to hear which one landed. If this video gave you something, share it with one person who needs to hear it tonight. That is how this channel grows. That is how this message moves. 2 words, the shortest verse in the Bible, the deepest sentence in the universe. Jesus wept.